A homeless veteran named Marcus Hale seeks help from Alexis Ward, a powerful CEO known for her quiet compassion. Drawn by a whispered recommendation, he enters her world burdened by trauma, guilt, and years of isolation. Alexis listens, offers stability, and connects him with specialists who help him confront the emotional wreckage he carries. As trust grows between them, Marcus slowly rebuilds a sense of worth and direction. Their connection deepens into a shared journey of healing, resilience, and truth. But just as Marcus begins to regain his footing, a long-buried secret from his past emerges, altering everything. Night had settled over the city in a slow hush, the kind that made the streetlights flicker like tired sentinels standing their final watch. Beneath their muted glow, a lone figure moved with deliberate caution, as though each step risked breaking something unseen in the world around him. His boots were worn, the leather cracked, the laces mismatched. His coat hung too loosely on his frame, a relic from years of service now repurposed for survival on unforgiving streets. He was a soldier once, though few who glanced at him now would imagine it. The strength that had carried him through foreign deserts and hostile nights still lived somewhere inside him, but it had been buried beneath months of hunger, silence, and the slow erosion of hope. His name was Marcus Hale, and for the past year he had slept wherever the city forgot to look. Yet tonight, something in him refused the usual numb routine of simply making it to morning. He walked with purpose toward the financial district, where glass towers cut into the sky and the sidewalks gleamed even after midnight rainfall. It wasn't a place he belonged, but then again, he no longer belonged anywhere. He carried a folded sheet of paper in his pocket, creased, sweat-marked, almost illegible. A list of numbers. Old contacts. Former commanders. People who might remember him. But the only number that mattered tonight was the one he didn't recognize, written in unfamiliar handwriting. Marcus didn't know the name attached to that number. Alexis Ward. All he knew was that someone at the shelter had whispered it with a kind of reverence, as though speaking of a figure carved from legend rather than flesh. A CEO, they said. Young, brilliant, unshakably disciplined. A woman who built an empire of clean energy tech from nothing but grit and night school degrees. Someone who had risen from poverty and never forgotten where she came from. Someone, they insisted, worth calling. But Marcus had not called. Phones were luxuries he no longer possessed. Instead, he had walked, miles, through the shrinking dark, toward the address written beneath the number. Ward Innovations Global Headquarters. A building so polished it might have been cut from the night itself. And as Marcus approached its towering glass entrance, he felt an old instinct rise within him, the quiet bracing of a soldier preparing for something he cannot predict but cannot turn away from either. The lobby inside was still lit despite the late hour, its marble floors reflecting the faint shimmer of digital displays cycling through company achievements. Marcus hesitated at the threshold, aware of how security cameras traced his outline. He had been observed before, police officers, wary pedestrians, shelter volunteers trained to watch without appearing to, but this felt different. Here, he was an interruption. A question mark. A possibility the building did not expect. He stepped inside anyway, the folded paper burning like a secret against his ribs. A lone night guard rose from behind the desk, his expression polite but guarded. Marcus recognized the stance, weight distributed evenly, hands visible, tone neutral yet ready to harden if necessary. The guard asked if he needed assistance. Marcus opened his mouth, but the words stalled like an engine refusing to turn. He hadn't spoken much in weeks. Speech felt foreign, cumbersome, almost fragile. He managed to say he needed to see Alexis Ward. The guard blinked, surprised yet not dismissive. He asked if Marcus had an appointment. Marcus shook his head. The guard exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that weighed situations, risks, and potential fallout. Marcus understood. He didn't belong here. He was a stranger with fraying clothes and hollow eyes, making an impossible request. But then he unfolded the paper and showed the number. The guard studied it, hesitation carving lines along his brow. After a long moment, he picked up the phone, dialing with the caution of someone unsure of consequences. Marcus waited, his posture straightening unconsciously, the way it had when superiors evaluated him during missions where silence held the weight of fate. He focused on breathing evenly, on keeping the tremor from his hands. When the guard finally looked up, his expression had changed, softened at the edges, almost curious. He gestured for Marcus to follow him to a seating area. Someone would come down, he said. Someone from the executive floor. Marcus felt a ripple of unease, a quiet premonition threading through his thoughts. He sat on the edge of the chair, his boots leaving faint traces of street dust on the pristine tile. The building hummed around him, air vents, distant servers, the occasional ping of an elevator arriving somewhere above. Time stretched. Marcus tried not to wonder whether this had been a mistake. He had made many in his life, but reaching out for help felt like the most dangerous of them all. Vulnerability, after all, had cost him more than bullets ever had. Outside, the storm clouds gathered again, pressing low over the city as though listening. Marcus watched them through the tall windows, recognizing the heaviness in their shape. Weather, he thought, had moods just like people. Some storms announced themselves with thunder, others crept in quietly, letting the air grow tense and expectant. This night felt like the latter. Something was coming. Not danger exactly, but change, unpredictable, unwelcome, yet necessary. He folded his hands together, grounding himself in the rhythm of his breath. A soft chime broke the stillness. Marcus turned as the elevator doors slid open, revealing not a security team, not an assistant, but a woman in a dark tailored coat, her presence steady and unhurried. She stepped out with the calm authority of someone accustomed to navigating crises. Her eyes landed on Marcus with a focus that felt neither cold nor startled, only alert, curious, and unexpectedly human. Though he had never seen her before, he knew instantly who she was. Alexis Ward had come herself. And in that moment, something in Marcus shifted, like a door unlocking inside him. He exhaled. Alexis Ward approached with footsteps that carried both precision and quiet empathy, a rare combination Marcus recognized even through the fog of exhaustion blanketing him. She stopped a careful distance away, not out of fear, but out of respect, as though giving him room to breathe after too long surviving in the cramped shadows of society. Her gaze swept over him, not assessing worth, but reading pain the way a seasoned leader reads battlefield reports, with gravity, with responsibility, with the instinct to understand before acting. "Marcus Hale?" she asked softly. His name sounded strange when spoken by someone else, as though it belonged to a version of him he'd misplaced. He nodded. Alexis inclined her head, the faintest sign of acknowledgement, then thanked the guard before motioning Marcus toward a small conference room just off the lobby. She didn't insist he follow. She simply opened the door and stepped inside, trusting he would choose for himself. After a hesitant heartbeat, Marcus rose and followed her. The room was quiet, with a long table and a wall of windows overlooking the rain-darkened streets. Alexis took a seat not at the head of the table but beside him, as though this were a conversation between equals rather than worlds divided by circumstance. Her presence had a gravity that didn't demand attention but invited it. Marcus felt his breath steady, subtly, almost against his will. She folded her hands on the table. "Someone gave you my number," she said. "I'm guessing it wasn't for business." Marcus reached into his pocket, retrieving the worn paper. He placed it on the table. Alexis studied it, tracing the handwriting with her eyes. Something flickered across her expression. Recognition, surprise, maybe something deeper. She looked at Marcus again, her voice quieter when she spoke. "Who gave this to you?" He swallowed. "A man at the shelter. Said you helped him once." Alexis leaned back slightly, processing that. She didn't smile. She didn't beam with pride. Instead, she absorbed the weight of it with the solemnity of someone who understood that kindness was never a performance but a responsibility that carried real consequences. "All right," she said. "Tell me what brought you here." Marcus hesitated, not because he didn't know the answer, but because saying it aloud meant acknowledging the truth he had avoided for months. The room seemed to lean in around him, quiet but expectant. Alexis waited without impatience. There was something in her stillness that reminded him of officers he once trusted, those rare leaders who listened before they commanded. "I lost my housing after I left the service," Marcus said finally, his voice tight. "Couldn't hold down work. Nightmares. Panic. Got fired. Then it got harder to keep going. Everything started slipping." He paused, searching for words that didn't exist. "I didn't come to you for money," he added quickly, defensively. "I didn't come to beg." Alexis shook her head gently. "Asking for help isn't begging." For me it is, Marcus replied, the sentence dropping heavily between them. Alexis let the silence settle before she spoke again. Do you have family? Marcus shook his head. Not anymore. What about treatment? Support from the VA? Anyone helping you navigate the paperwork? He gave a humorless laugh. I barely navigate the day. Alexis absorbed that. Her gaze softened, not with pity, but with something closer to resolve. She stood, crossed to a cabinet in the corner, and returned with 2 bottles of water, placing one in front of him. Marcus nodded in thanks, unscrewing the cap slowly, the cool plastic unfamiliar against his fingertips. He took a small sip, letting it wash the dryness from his throat. Marcus, Alexis said, her tone measured but full of intention, you walked all the way here. In the middle of the night. That tells me 2 things. You're exhausted, and you're not done fighting yet. He looked away, jaw tightening. I don't feel like I'm fighting. No one does when they're fighting for themselves, she replied. That's the hardest kind. Her words cut through him, clean, precise, refusing to flatter but unwilling to wound. He felt something shift again, a subtle alignment of broken pieces inside him. He hadn't expected to feel anything in this building of glass and ambition. Yet here he was, letting her voice settle into places he'd long kept barricaded. Alexis watched him for a moment before continuing. I don't know what you need yet. A place to stay? A job? Therapy? Stability? She paused. But I do know this. You're not leaving this building tonight without a plan. Marcus inhaled sharply, a reflexive mix of relief and fear. Plans had once defined his life. They had been maps, strategies, lifelines. But ever since his return from deployment, plans had become impossible luxuries. Every attempt at rebuilding collapsed under the weight of memories he couldn't silence. I don't want to be your charity case, he murmured. Alexis leaned forward, her expression firm. This isn't charity. This is what people do when they haven't forgotten each other. Something about the way she said it, quiet, unembellished, certain, broke through the last of his resistance. Emotion rose in his chest, raw and unfamiliar after months of numbness, and he had to look down to steady himself. Alexis didn't interrupt. She gave him space, a gift far more valuable than any service or donation. When he finally looked up, she asked, Can you trust me? At least for tonight. Marcus considered the question carefully. Trust had once been sacred to him, something built through shared danger and integrity. But somewhere along the road of survival, trust had become a liability he couldn't afford. Now, staring at Alexis Ward, the woman who built a corporation yet willingly walked downstairs at midnight to meet a stranger, he felt the faint return of something he thought he'd lost, the instinct to believe in someone. He nodded. And Alexis exhaled, the softest sign of relief. Good, she said. Because tomorrow, everything begins to change. Morning arrived as a gray wash against the city skyline, the kind of muted dawn that blurred edges and softened the hard lines of skyscrapers. Marcus hadn't slept. Alexis had arranged a private room on the building's wellness floor, normally reserved for traveling executives, but he'd spent the night sitting upright on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet hum of ventilation and the distant pulse of elevators moving through the tower like metallic arteries. Safety, he realized, could feel as unsettling as danger when a man had lived too long without it. When the knock came at 7 a.m., Marcus straightened instinctively, an old reflex from barracks mornings long past. Alexis stepped inside, crisp and composed, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him without formality and gestured for him to follow her. There's someone I want you to meet, she said. The hallway outside the room was lined with soft light panels that mimicked natural sunlight. Alexis walked beside him rather than ahead, a gesture that spoke volumes. They entered an office where a woman in her 50s waited, tall, composed, with silver-threaded braids pulled neatly behind her shoulders. Her posture conveyed both gentleness and unshakable competence. Marcus, this is Dr. Lillian Shaw, Alexis said. She's our head of mental resilience research. She also worked for the VA for years. Dr. Shaw nodded warmly. I've read your service record, she said, her tone careful, respectful. Not every line of it, just what Alexis felt would help me understand how to help you. Marcus stiffened at the idea of anyone reading his file, But Dr. Shaw raised a hand gently. "We don't have to discuss anything you're not ready for." For a moment, he remained silent, unsure whether this was another evaluation he was destined to fail. But something in Dr. Shaw's voice, the steadiness, the lack of urgency, coaxed him into a kind of tentative ease. Alexis stepped back slightly, letting the two converse without hovering. Yet her presence lingered as a quiet anchor at the edge of the room. Dr. Shaw asked him soft questions. Not invasive. Not clinical in the cold sense. More like someone navigating a dim corridor with a lantern, illuminating only what Marcus allowed her to see. She asked about sleep. Flashbacks. Startle responses. The weight he carried in his chest each morning. Marcus answered haltingly at first, then with growing steadiness. He found himself describing moments he hadn't spoken aloud in years, memories that had stalked him through long nights beneath highway overpasses or behind the thin, cold shelter blankets that never kept out the wind. After nearly an hour, Dr. Shaw leaned back, her expression contemplative. "You're carrying trauma," she said, "but you're not broken. You're exhausted. And exhaustion makes every wound feel larger than life." Marcus stared at the floor, unable to respond. Alexis stepped forward, her voice softer now. "We can build a plan," she said. "But I want to know what you want, not what you think you should ask for." He blinked, surprised. Want had become a foreign language to him. Needs were simple: warmth, food, safety. But want implied deserving. And he hadn't let himself believe in that possibility for a long time. Finally he said, "I want a chance. A real one." Alexis exchanged a glance with Dr. Shaw, a silent conversation between two women accustomed to solving impossible problems. Alexis then turned back to him. "Then we'll start with stability. A place to stay. Access to Dr. Shaw's team. Food. Sleep. After that, we'll look at work, real work that fits your skills." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, to insist he didn't need charity or corporate pity, but Alexis raised a hand before he spoke. "This is not charity," she repeated. "This is an investment, in a life worth rebuilding." He closed his mouth slowly, unsure whether to accept or remain suspicious of a world that had taught him to brace for withdrawal more than generosity. Alexis seemed to read the storm crossing his mind. "We'll go step by step," she said. She led him next to a training floor filled with advanced simulators, ergonomic equipment, and quiet spaces designed for cognitive rebuilds. Ward Innovations had a program, one most of the public never heard about, where veterans were trained for new careers inside the company. Alexis showed him how the program worked, how soldiers were paired with mentors, how the transitions were steady and individualized. "You'd fit here," she said simply. Marcus felt a flicker of something in his chest, something between disbelief and fragile hope. "Why?" he asked. "You don't know me." "I can see who you used to be," Alexis said. "That's enough to know who you could be again." He forced himself to breathe slowly, grounding the sudden rush of emotion that threatened to unsteady him. They spent the next several hours touring the facility. Everywhere he walked, staff nodded respectfully to Alexis, but their eyes lingered on Marcus with curiosity, not disdain. For the first time in months, he didn't feel invisible, or worse, a cautionary presence. By early afternoon, Alexis guided him to a rooftop garden, a quiet refuge high above the city. Green vines curled along steel beams, and benches were arranged beneath panels of soft shade. The wind carried the scent of basil and damp soil. "This is where I come to think," Alexis said. "I want you to have moments like this. Space to breathe." Marcus sat, letting the breeze wash over him. He watched the city from this new angle, its noise muted, its chaos distant. From here, the world seemed manageable. Alexis sat beside him. "Tell me something," she said. "When you were serving, what part of yourself were you proudest of?" He paused. The question reached into a part of him he had long buried. Finally he said, "I was good at protecting people. Not in the heroic sense. Just ensuring no one was left behind." Alexis nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe that's your way back," she said. "Not erasing who you were, just redirecting it." Her words settled over him like a truth he hadn't known he was seeking. But just as he began to imagine a future that didn't feel like a distant fantasy, a new uncertainty tugged at him. "What if I can't come back from all this?" he asked quietly. Alexis looked at him, the wind lifting a strand of hair from her face. "Then you won't have to come back alone." It was such a simple promise, yet it hit him harder than any vow he'd heard in uniform. He stared out at the skyline again, letting the weight of the moment anchor him. For the first time since he returned from war, Marcus Hale felt the beginning of a turning point. Small, trembling, but real. And though he didn't yet know it, this fragile shift would soon collide with a revelation that neither he nor Alexis could have anticipated, a revelation already moving toward them like a shadow crossing the horizon. The revelation arrived on a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind of day that felt too calm, too uneventful, as though the universe were drawing a long breath before speaking something it had waited years to say. Marcus had spent the morning in one of Ward Innovation's training labs, working with a small cohort of veterans who were being retrained in systems management. He moved carefully, listening more than speaking, absorbing the rhythm of the room the way a soldier studies the tempo of an unfamiliar terrain. By now, he had been in the program for 3 weeks. He slept in a small transitional apartment provided by the company. He saw Dr. Shaw twice a week. He ate regularly. He shaved again. He felt the tremors in his hands slowly weakening, as though the ghosts inside him were losing their grip. For the first time in a long while, the world didn't feel like an adversary waiting for him to fail. He and Alexis had grown into a quiet, steady rhythm of connection. She checked on him often, sometimes with purpose, sometimes simply to understand how he was navigating each new step. Their conversations were never rushed, never superficial. She spoke to him as though he were not just a responsibility, but a person whose presence in her life mattered. And Marcus, though cautious, had started to believe that maybe he mattered, too. That afternoon, Alexis met him outside the lab, her expression neutral but unreadably focused. Marcus sensed the shift instantly. Leaders carried different kinds of quiet depending on the storm approaching, and he recognized this one, controlled urgency. "I need to show you something," she said. He followed her without question, though unease coiled in his stomach. They took a private elevator to the executive archives, a secure floor he had never seen. The walls were lined with glass cases containing historical documents, early prototypes, original patents, faded photographs of the company's first employees. Yet Alexis didn't pause for any of it. She led him to a restricted door, scanned her ID, and entered. Inside, the room was dim and cold, lit only by recessed lights aimed at a long table. On it lay a file, thin, unassuming, but placed with deliberate care. Alexis approached it slowly, as though handling something fragile. "Before I explain," she said quietly, "I want you to know this doesn't change the support you're getting. It doesn't change what we're building here for you." Marcus frowned. "Why would it?" She inhaled, steadying herself. "Because this file contains a truth about your past. One you were never supposed to know." His heartbeat quickened. "What truth?" Alexis opened the file and slid a document toward him. It was an old military intelligence report, partially declassified, partially redacted. At the top was a date from the year Marcus's unit had been stationed overseas during their final deployment. Beneath it, a list of names. He scanned them, his breath catching as he found familiar ones, soldiers he'd fought beside, slept beside, bled beside. But then he saw a name he had never expected to appear in any document tied to his unit. Ward, Samuel. Marcus looked up sharply. "Ward? As in?" "My brother," Alexis said. Her voice didn't tremble, but her hands had subtly tightened. "He served in the intelligence wing of your base. His division was covert. Most of his work was classified. I didn't even know he was stationed near your route until the day he died." Marcus's chest tightened painfully. He remembered that day, the explosion that tore through the convoy ahead of them, the smoke that turned the sky the color of dusk, the shouts, the ringing in his ears that didn't fade for weeks. They'd been told the casualties were from a civilian transport. Not intelligence. Not special ops. Not anyone connected to a name that would one day tower over an entire industry. "They told us it was an accident," Marcus said, his voice low. "A roadside mine triggered too early." Alexis closed the file. "It wasn't." The air felt suddenly dense, every breath an effort. "What are you saying?" "My brother's last report," she said, "indicated that someone leaked your unit's travel route. The explosion wasn't an accident. It was orchestrated. And your unit was never supposed to survive it. Marcus felt the ground tilt beneath him. He shook his head. No. No, that's not. Why would anyone target us? Because your unit was protecting the transport holding classified equipment, Alexis said quietly. Not civilian supplies. The truth was buried. My brother was killed trying to expose it. Marcus's hands gripped the edge of the table. His pulse hammered in his ears. Memories ignited one by one, the ambushes that made no sense, the missions that felt too exposed, the unexplained intelligence lapses that left them vulnerable. He remembered the confusion, the anger, the sense of betrayal that clung to them long after the blast. So all this time, he whispered. You were never given answers, Alexis finished. You deserved them. Marcus stepped back, his breathing uneven. Why are you telling me this now? Because you've been carrying guilt that never belonged to you, Alexis said. You blamed yourself for surviving that day. I've seen it in every choice you make, every hesitation, every apology that slips into your voice. You thought you failed them. She paused. But Marcus, you didn't. You were failed by people who never paid the price for it. His vision blurred. He turned away, struggling to anchor himself. Alexis stepped closer but didn't touch him. She simply stood near enough that he could feel her presence, a steadying weight in a room where the past had erupted like a fresh wound. After several long minutes, Marcus managed to speak again. Why did you go digging into this? Alexis exhaled. Because the night you walked into my lobby, I saw a man carrying a burden shaped by silence. I wanted to understand what broke you, so I could help you rebuild without that lie corrupting the foundation. Marcus pressed a hand to his forehead, the weight of the revelation settling into him like cold rain. Your brother, he died because of what happened to us. And now you're helping me? Why? She met his gaze steadily. Because Samuel believed every soldier mattered. Because he died chasing truth. And because when I saw you, Marcus, I recognized the same thing I saw in him. A protector who lost everything because someone else made a choice he never got to confront. Emotion tightened his throat, thick and unyielding. He felt exposed, seen in ways he hadn't been seen since before the war. Yet beneath the shock, beneath the grief and fury waking inside him, something else stirred, a thin, trembling strand of liberation. He had been haunted for years by the idea that he had failed. But now, the story he had carried was unraveling, revealing a truth he'd never been allowed to consider. It wasn't my fault, he whispered. No, Alexis said. It never was. The weight of those words broke something open inside him, something that had calcified into shame and silence. And though he didn't yet know what this truth would demand of him, he sensed the narrative of his life shifting, reorienting, gathering momentum toward a reckoning long overdue. In the dim, cold archive room, Marcus Hale felt the past finally turn toward him, not as a specter, but as a truth ready to be confronted. And the next step, whatever it would be, would change everything. The days that followed moved with a different gravity, heavier, slower, as though every hour carried the residue of the revelation Marcus had been forced to confront. The truth about his unit's ambush clung to him like a second skin. It filled the spaces between breaths. It shadowed him as he walked the polished hallways of Ward Innovations, each step echoing with questions he had buried long ago. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, something inside him began to recalibrate. The guilt he had carried for years no longer felt like an anchor dragging him beneath the surface. Instead, it had become a weight he was learning to set down piece by piece. The past had not changed, but the story he told himself about it had. And in the quiet aftermath of revelation, Marcus realized that survival was not a failure. It was evidence. It meant he was still here. And now he knew why. One evening, after another long session with Dr. Shaw, Marcus found himself drawn back to the rooftop garden where he and Alexis had spoken weeks earlier. The sun was dipping low over the skyline, casting warm gold across the city's steel and glass. He sat on the same bench, hands clasped loosely, watching the slow shift of light. He expected to sit alone, but a familiar presence approached, footsteps soft against the stone path. "Couldn't find you downstairs," Alexis said as she settled beside him. "You always do," he replied quietly. They sat in easy silence for a moment, the breeze carrying the scent of rosemary from the planter beds. Finally, Alexis spoke. "How are you holding up?" Marcus considered the question. The real answer was layered, complicated. But he found clarity in the simplest truth. "Lighter," he said. "Not okay. Not yet. But lighter." Alexis nodded, her gaze gentle. "That matters." He looked out across the cityscape. "I keep thinking about your brother," Marcus said. "About the fact that he died trying to protect us. Trying to protect the truth. I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything with it," she replied. "His choices were his own. His values, too." She paused, her voice softening. "But I think he would have wanted you to live without the shadows that were never yours to carry." Marcus absorbed that, the words settling into him like warm light chasing the last cold edges of fear. "I don't know how to start over," he admitted. "You don't have to start over," she said. "You just have to start." He let out a slow breath, feeling the truth of that settle deeper than he expected. "Dr. Shaw thinks I'm ready to take a role in the program," he said. "Helping train new veterans coming in." Alexis smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips. "I think she's right. You've already been doing it without realizing." "I don't know if I'm ready." "You don't have to be perfect to be ready," she replied. "You just have to be willing." Marcus looked at her then, studying her profile against the fading light, the woman who had opened a door he never expected to stand before, let alone walk through. She had carried his truth with careful hands, not to break him but to free him. And he found himself asking a question he never thought he'd form. "Why did you believe in me so quickly? You didn't know me." Alexis turned her head, meeting his gaze steadily. "Because I know what it's like to see someone suffer in silence. I know what it's like to wish someone had reached out sooner." She paused. "And because I saw the look in your eyes the night you walked into my lobby. You weren't looking for a savior. You were looking for a chance. People who ask for a chance usually deserve one." The wind swept lightly across the rooftop, cool and clean. Marcus felt something ease inside him, a long-held breath he had never fully released. A soft chime sounded from Alexis's phone, but she ignored it, turning her attention fully back to him. "There's something else I want to show you," she said. She reached into her coat pocket and handed him a small, sealed envelope. His name was written across the front in careful, tight handwriting unfamiliar to him. Marcus hesitated before opening it, sensing the weight contained within its paper. Inside was a single page from a worn notebook. The top corner was torn. The writing was hurried but legible. And at the bottom, a signature. Samuel Ward. Marcus's breath caught. "It was found with his personal effects," Alexis said gently. "It took years to declassify. I got it only recently. And I think it was meant for you." Marcus read the words slowly, his pulse echoing in his ears. "If this reaches you, it means things went wrong. Not your fault. Never your fault. Protect your men. Protect yourself. Whatever story they tell you, remember what you saw. Remember who you are. The truth matters, even if we never get to speak it aloud." The world around Marcus blurred. He had to blink several times before the words steadied again. His chest tightened, not with pain, but with an overwhelming raw sense of connection, to a man he never met, yet somehow, through devastation and time, had been bound to. He looked up, meeting Alexis's gaze. "Thank you," he said, the words holding more weight than any medal he'd ever received. She placed a hand lightly on the bench between them, not touching him, but close enough that he felt the warmth of her presence. "You deserved to know," she said. "You deserved peace." The two of them sat in the falling dusk, the city lights flickering awake below like constellations rising to the surface. Marcus felt the moment settle around him, quiet, healing, profound. He wasn't healed yet. He wasn't whole. But he was no longer lost. After a while, he stood. Alexis rose with him. "So," she said with a soft exhale, "are you ready?" He didn't rush his answer. He looked over the city, breathing in the cool night air, letting everything he had endured, everything he had reclaimed, align into something steady inside him. "Yes," he said at last. "I'm ready." Together, they walked back toward the elevator. two lives once separated by circumstance, now bound by truth, resilience, and the quiet rebirth of hope. And as the rooftop door closed gently behind them, Marcus Hale stepped forward into a future he had never imagined he'd live to see. Not as a ghost of the past, but as a man finally returning home to himself.